Okay, hello. Today is the 10th of August 2023, and we'll talk about two architects today. One is Cedric Price, the other one Vittorio Gregotti. But we'll begin with Cedric Price. He died exactly 20 years ago, on the 10th of August 2003. Cedric Price Friba was an English architect, an influential teacher, and writer on architecture. The son of an architect, Price was born in Stone, Staffordshire, and studied architecture at Cambridge University and the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London, where he encountered and was influenced by the modernist architect and urban planner Arthur Curtin. From 1958 to 1964, he taught part-time at the Architectural Association and at the Council of Industrial Design. He later founded PolyArch, an architectural schools network. After graduation, Price worked briefly for Erno Goldfinger, Dennis Lasdon, the partnership of Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, and applied unsuccessfully for a post at London County Council, working briefly as a professional illustrator before starting his own practice in 1960. He worked with the Earl of Snowdon and Frank Noby and on the design of the Snowdon Aviary at London Zoo, perhaps the best work by him. He later also worked with Buckminster Fuller. One of his more notable projects was the East London Fun Place from 1961, developed in association with theatrical director Joan Littlewood and cybernetician Gordon Pask. Although it was never built, its flexible space influenced other architects, notably Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano, whose Center Georges Pompidou in Paris extended many of Price's ideas, some of which Price used on a more modest scale in the Interaction Centre at Kentish Town, London, 1971. Having conceived the idea of using architecture and education as a way to drive economic redevelopment, notably in the North Staffordshire Potteries area, the Think Belt project, he continued to contribute to planning debates. Think Belt envisaged the reuse of an abandoned railway line as a roving higher education facility, re-establishing the potteries as a center of science and technology. Mobile classroom, laboratory, and residential modules could be moved, grouped, and assembled as required. In 1969, with planner Sir Peter Hall and the editor of New Society magazine, Paul Barker, he published Non-Plan. Just a second, because the text is hidden here. Work challenging planning orthodoxy. So, as we can see, he was an active force in architecture and social engagement. This was the man, in another humorous collage, Cedric Price, the unarchitect, with a very architectural, cigar in his mouth, like many other important architects who love cigars for some reason. I wonder what Dr. Freud would say about this. He is very highly valued by many people. Like 2 years ago, Elizabeth Diller entered on Zoom platform when I talked about, on September 11, actually, when I talked about Cedric Price, and she was very interested in his contribution to architecture, even from the side of unarchitecture. The Kistler Prize, 2002, that is Frederick Isler. Here he was, an interesting man. Architectural drawings have a variety of uses: to instruct, inform, indulge, confuse, confirm, congratulate, and console. Cedric Price. Let's read again. Architectural drawings have a variety of uses: to instruct, inform, indulge, confuse, confirm, congratulate, and console. Now, the Fun Palace for Joan Littlewood project, Stratford, East London, England, 1959-1961. Fun Palace for Joan Littlewood was conceived for the East End of London as a laboratory of fun and the university of the streets. Although it was never realized, unlike other visionary projects of the 60s, it was fully intended to be built. Designed as a flexible framework into which programmable spaces can be plugged, the structure has as its ultimate goal the possibility of change at the behest of its users. Price belonged to a generation of British architects and educators who used architecture both to address the future and as the ultimate social art. Price's personal vision of the city was inventive and playful and expressed his sense of architecture's moral obligations towards its users. Price was fascinated by new technology and believed that it should both serve the public and further human freedom. He was determined that his work would not impose physical or psychological constraints upon its occupants, nor reduce them to a standard form, unlike typical modern architecture. So, drawings from the Fun Palace. We can see why, his work preceded the winning entry for the Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris by Renzo Piano and Sir Richard Rogers and Peter Rice as well. And there was a third architect there whose name, unfortunately, I didn't memorize, and this is to my shame. So there were more than just Sir Richard Rogers and future Sir Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano. Anyway, we can see in these drawings the attempt to democratize architecture and to bring the pleasure principle or the fun into the social fabric. So it's a fun machine, not a machine for thinking, not a machine for living, but a machine for having fun. But personally, I think we are too much concerned with having fun. So the entertainment industry, I think, hides a lot behind it. And what it hides is the pain of the 5 working days. That's what it hides. Anyway, this is for another discussion about civilization and fun. Pottery's Think Bell project, Staffordshire, England, 1964-1966. Cedric Price came onto the British architectural scene in the late 50s, a time in which housing complexes, schools, industrial parks, and new towns were springing up all over Britain. There was an overriding belief in a socially responsibly architecture and general feeling of optimism about the future and architecture's capacity to improve the environment. Price, however, was determined that his work would not impose physical or psychological constraints upon its occupants, nor reduce them to standards, as did modernist architecture. Through the pairing of humor and playfulness with complete conviction, Price's projects all attest to his belief in an architecture that provides inhabitants as well as the viewers individual freedoms. Technology based on the paradigm of a flexible network rather than a static structure played an essential role in his work. I can't really describe what I see here. The Pottery Zinc Belt project. Um, well, most of his work remained at the level of a project, but they are important, these works, for architectural thinking prior to architectural action. Pottery Zinc Belt was Cedric Price's critique of the traditional university system, situated in a decaying industrial landscape rather than in the usual urban or rural site. The Zinc Belt occupied 100 square meters of the once vital Staffordshire potteries. It was designed to be an infinitely extendable network as opposed to a centralized campus, and to create a widespread community of learning while also promoting economic growth. The framework for the network was a 100-year-old railway system, no longer in use. Not only would it transport people between housing and learning areas, but the cars themselves would become mobile teaching units, complete with inflatable lecture theaters, fold-out desks, and information carrels. The units could be combined and transferred to various sites as needed. So an interesting idea, to bring education to the railways. He was a visionary, and that's why most of his ideas didn't become implemented. But no one was able to, impose on him non-action. Pottery Zinc Belt project, this is the plan of desire lines, physical and mental exchange. I like this, desire lines, plan of desire lines, physical and mental exchange. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I like the wording. Perspective of battery, crate, and capsule housing. Don't know what that pyramid is doing there. City of the Future project. Cedric Price belonged to a 1950s generation of British architects and educators who were intensely concerned with an architecture of the future at the same time that they saw architecture as the ultimate social act. Price's personal vision of the city then was inventive and current, while also expressing his sense of architecture's moral obligations. Fascinated by new technology, I think I read this before, he also believed that its use must be appropriate, playing a role in society that to serve the public and further its freedom and flexibility rather than confining them. In essence, he was questing for freedom. His ideas were visionary, but were grounded in the realization that architecture must work for all people. It's hard to see this drawing. Yeah. I mean, the drawing for a city of the future comprises 14 vignette-like perspectives with accompanying text, which together can be considered a summary of ideas about the city that Price had presented in more detail in earlier projects. One of his principles was that the elements that make up the city, such as buildings and service devices, must respond to the user automatically. Essentially, he was calling for a form of artificial intelligence, an idea he had developed in his Pottery Zinc Belt project of 1963, an unconventional higher education facility that, if built, would have been located in a depressed industrial area. He also refuted the ancient assumption that buildings are stationary, suggesting instead that buildings of the modern age could move. The traveling gantry crane and suspended rooms and walkways that he had worked out in his Fun Palace project of 1960-1961 reappear in more general terms in the city of the future through the description, the potential of phased movement of goods, shelters, and equipment by means of mechanical and magnetic suspension. Well, it was an optimistic assessment, uh, ignoring what was to come. Because I don't know if today we should be so fond of exacerbating movement. Generator project, White Oak, Florida, design thoughts used as reminders within office, be whatever that means, 1977, 1978. The generator, an early investigation into artificially intelligent architecture, was designed with no specific program, but only a desire and effect in mind. The project was commissioned by Howard Gilman for a site at the Gilman Paper Corporation's White Oak plantation in Florida to provide a facility to house dance, theater, and visiting artists. Cedric Price explored a type of architecture that, like medicine, would operate less as a remedy for the ills of society and more as a preventive system, creating flexible conditions previously thought impossible within a socially beneficial environment. This complicated project, for which many drawings and diagrams were made, was essentially a system of cube-like elements that could be moved and combined with others or with additional elements to create temporary structures for a rehearsal or performance space, housing, or just contemplation within a lush natural setting. It was intended to operate by means of a central computer with which a visitor would combine any of the 150 of the generator's 4x4 meter fully serviced air-conditioned cubes or walls, screens, gangways, and communications channels into a structure. The computer would encourage the visitor to continually refine and improve his or her design. In fact, change and artistic freedom are the underlying ideas of the generator. They were considered prerequisites, and the computer was to be programmed to make unsolicited alterations should the framework remain static. Price's intricate scheme to provide an environment dedicated to nurturing the arts was never built. And now we see pages from this unbuilt project. Plenty of drawings, plenty of ideas, a lot of desire to change the world. It's a rather mysterious drawing. An unexpected nostalgia. The generator project model and 5 enclosures. As you can see, lots of technology, but at the same time, nature. And I imagine the medium of the drawing being watercolor. What could be more opposed to what we look at here? Nature and technology. Full-scale on-site mock-up with figure. There was idealism here, a naivete too, but let's remember what Buckminster Fuller said, dare to be naive. These need to be studied. I didn't. So He died on the 10th of August, exactly 20 years ago. So if you want, let's have a short talk about him, and then we'll talk about Vittorio Gregotti.